To get from one coast of the United States to the other in the mid-19th century, you had to embark on a fairly serious adventure that would take several months, during which you would have to travel along the Oregon Trail. This route is even called by some the longest cemetery in the country, since it claimed the life of every 10th person who set out on the journey. The road begins in the city of Independence, after which you are faced with 3,500 kilometers of steppes and deserts, and encounters with often hostile Native Americans. And then, as a boss at the end, you still have to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains, and you have to manage to do this before winter. The well-known story of the Donner Group, which began crossing this mountain range when the snow had already fallen, ended very sadly. Well, the only positive there was that the lake was named after the leader of the group. Otherwise, people had to eat their relatives and friends. And this, in general, is clearly not an isolated case, just the most famous one, because the members of that expedition kept a diary. This diary immediately makes it into the newspapers, and although this story frightens many settlers, the number of those wishing to go west 2 to 3 years later still only increases. Because after the discovery of gold deposits in California, the gold rush begins. Many people are fired up with the desire to go there and try their luck. And then all this mined gold still somehow has to be delivered to the banks of New York on the opposite side of the continent, and the Oregon route is clearly not the safest path to transport kilograms of gold along it. Also, this route does not suit the more affluent settlers who want to get from east to west quickly and in more comfortable conditions. The most obvious solution to the problem is to lay a railroad that will connect the already existing eastern railroads with California and the Pacific Ocean. As early as 1847, the U.S. Congress agreed that this was a good idea. However, before the first rails of the Pacific Railroad are laid, 16 years will pass, and until the first trip, another 6. But there is still some way out of the situation. You can save up $400, board a ship in New York or in New Orleans, and head to Panama. There, cross the Isthmus of Panama, and board another ship, which will already take you to California. All in all, it will take about 40 days. This is, of course, better than traveling along the Oregon Trail, the journey along which can drag on for as long as half a year. But although the route through Panama saves your time, the risk of losing your life remains the same and possibly even becomes greater. In general, welcome to Panama. So, as I already said, the entire journey to California through Panama takes 40 days. But 8 of these days are spent on the way, through the mountains and rivers of Panama, which is known for deadly diseases and hungry fauna. The terrain is absolutely wild and simply teeming with alligators, poisonous snakes, sandflies, and mosquitoes, which will infect you with malaria and yellow fever. And you will also be stalked by diseases such as cholera and dysentery. Insurance companies even include special clauses in their contracts that allow them to cancel the contract and not pay money if the client goes into these Panamanian jungles, because there was little hope that a person would successfully cross them and reach the Pacific Ocean. And of course, there is no normal infrastructure there. Most of the hotels where you can spend the night are wooden huts, and instead of any kind of proper road, travelers have to hire local residents so that they first help them cross the river by boats or canoe, and then cover part of the way riding mules waist-deep in mud, and watching as vultures on the side eat dead mules left by previous travelers. And since the demand for a fast, more comfortable and safe route is growing stronger, especially because of the gold rush, there is also a man who wants to satisfy this demand. His name is William Aspen, and he decides to build a railroad across the Isthmus of Panama and do it at any cost. William Aspen is a shipping magnate. His trading company owns the 3 fastest ships in the world. This vessel is so fast that in 1849, it makes the journey from Hong Kong to New York in just 74 days. Try to guess in what year this record will be broken. Thought about it. This record will be broken only in 2003. Recently, in 185, William Spinwall, with $1 million in financing, heads south to begin work on the railroad across the Isthmus of Panama. But it very quickly becomes obvious that William and his investors are trying to bite off a piece bigger than they can swallow. The area where the railroad has to be built is a swamp. Moreover, As I already said, a swamp with alligators, spreading malaria, and where one of the most poisonous trees in the world grows. Just Google the manchineel tree. It is listed in the Guinness Book of Records, and is so poisonous that it is dangerous even just to stand next to it. And in these conditions, thousands of workers arrive at the construction site. They are hired in Grenada, which owns Panama. In neighboring Central American countries, they come from Ireland, Jamaica, Australia, the USA, and receive for their hard labor only from 40 cents to $1 a day, depending on ethnicity. They have no proper housing. They work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. There are practically no mechanical aids, and all the work has to be done manually, with a small help from horses and mules. Kilometers of lianas and roots are cut down with machetes. Powerful trees, 9 meters in circumference, are cut down with ordinary axes and carried away from the construction site by hand because of the swampy terrain. The first kilometers of railroad are laid on wooden piles, which are driven into the sand by workers standing chest deep in this swamp. And all this in fierce tropical heat with high humidity and surrounded by mosquitoes. Workers die by the hundreds from diseases, and thousands quit the job, resign, and leave. At this pace, in 2 years, by the end of 1851, only 12 kilometers of railroad are built. Moreover, the entire million allocated for construction runs out. It seemed that the project was doomed. But people crossing Panama so do not want to go through these jungles that they are ready to pay any money, even just to travel comfortably at least these 12 kilometers along the already built railroad. This fact keeps the project afloat. Spinwall's company immediately orders passenger cars from the USA, and throughout the rest of the construction, simply transports travelers as far as the railroad extends. Ideally, the construction had to be finished urgently, because at this time, the Panama Railroad gets a competitor. Cornelius Vanderbilt, one of the richest people in the history of mankind, begins transporting those who wish by steamships and trains through Nicaragua. The route is better than the jungles of Panama, but with a large number of transfers, which is not very convenient for transporting cargo. The Panama Railroad, in case of completion, should become more convenient, and in order to finish it as soon as possible, Aspen, with the help of his super-fast ship, which I already mentioned, making voyages in 60 days, brings thousands of workers from China. The attitude toward them is little better than toward slaves. They receive $4 a month, and the construction ends on January 27, 1855. The Panama Railroad becomes the first railroad that connects 2 oceans. By this time, thanks to ticket sales, it has already paid off more than a third of the total construction cost, which eventually amounted to $8 million. It was the most expensive railroad in the world at that time. In today's terms, the construction cost $280 million. Now, to get from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, instead of 8 days, you had to spend only 4 hours, and the entire journey from New York to San Francisco took only 3 weeks, while passengers were also in comfortable and safe living conditions. Between 1848 and 1861, about 600,000 passengers made the trip through Panama. The overwhelming majority of them used the railroad, but for world trade cargo transportation carried out with the help of this railroad was much more important. In the second year after its opening, gold worth about $150 million was sent east, and in total, goods worth $750 million were transported. Now, for the eastern coast of the USA and for all of Europe, goods from the regions of the Pacific Ocean were easily accessible until the time of the opening of the Panama Canal. This railroad transported more goods than any other railroad in the world. However, as you already understood, money is not all that was paid for the construction. There are no exact data, but out of 17,000 workers from heat diseases and absolutely terrible conditions, about 4,000 to 6,000 people died there. The railroad company stated that by 1855, among white workers, only 293 died. The rest apparently were not counted. But when France in the 1880s unsuccessfully tried to dig a shipping canal in Panama, which would directly connect 2 oceans, a whole quarter of the workers died. So most likely the percentage of deaths during the construction of the railroad was about the same among those affected by the railroad. You can suddenly find the residents of Panama themselves who previously earned money from travelers by providing them escort services and all that, and now were left without work. In 1856, there was even a watermelon riot, during which the railroad was damaged because the residents of Panama considered it the cause of economic misfortune. Thanks to railroads and the telegraph, the 19th century became a time when distance no longer seemed so great. Wealthy people wanted to conquer time and save it, as well as unite the world with global trade. Of course, projects such as the Panama Railroad improved the lives of a huge number of people around the world. However, one should always remember that the price of these ambitions was the lives of thousands of ordinary workers.